the scalpel sliced through my throat like butter. I should have been dead. I was dead. The cold metal table beneath my naked body, the harsh fluorescent lights burning my retinas, the sound of my own blood dripping onto the hospital floor. It was all real. Adrian stood over me in stolen scrubs, his handsome face twisted with sadistic pleasure as he carved into my flesh, like I was nothing more than meat. "You always were too trusting, Halena," he whispered, dragging the blade across my collarbone. "Did you really think I loved you, that anyone could love something so pathetically naive?" I tried to scream, but the paralytic he'd injected ensured only my eyes could move. I could feel everything, every cut, every drop of blood, every moment of exquisite agony as he slowly dismembered me while I was still conscious. Your precious company, your inheritance, your body. It was all mine the moment you said yes to my proposal. Victoria and I have been planning this for months. She's probably burning your will right now, the one where you left everything to charity. He laughed, a sound like glass breaking. The new will leaves everything to your devoted fiancé, me. The final cut severed my spinal cord. Then darkness. Then, "Halena, wake up, sleeping beauty," I gasped, lurching upright in my bed, my hands flying to my throat. Smooth skin, no cuts, no blood, just the familiar silk of my nightgown and the morning sunlight streaming through the windows of my penthouse bedroom. Bad dream! Victoria Romano, perched on the edge of my bed, her perfectly manicured fingers brushing a strand of auburn hair from my face, the same fingers that would help Adrian hold me down in 3 days' time. I stared at her, my heart hammering against my ribs. She looked exactly as I remembered, beautiful, concerned, the picture of a devoted best friend. But now I could see what I'd missed before, the calculating gleam in her green eyes, the way her smile never quite reached them, the subtle tension in her shoulders like a predator ready to strike. What day is it?" I whispered. "October 15th, silly. Your engagement party is tonight, remember. Adrian's been calling all morning. He's so excited he can barely contain himself." She stood up, smoothing down her designer dress. "Speaking of which, he wanted me to give you this." She held out a small white envelope with my name written in Adrian's familiar handwriting. Inside was a single white pill. "He said you've been having trouble sleeping since the merger stress started. This should help you relax before the big party tonight." The pill. The same one he dissolved in my wine during our final dinner. The same poison that had shut down my organs one by one while he watched with fake concern. In my previous life, I'd taken it gratefully, trusting both of them completely. I'd felt so lucky to have such caring people in my life, such loving, devoted people who wanted nothing but my happiness. Now I knew better. "That's so thoughtful of him," I murmured, taking the pill and palming it smoothly. "I'll take it right now." I pretended to swallow it, then smiled at Victoria. "You know, I've been thinking about what we discussed last week, about signing my shares over to Adrian after we marry." Victoria's pupils dilated slightly, excitement poorly concealed. "Oh? And what did you decide?" "I want to do it. Tonight, actually, before the party." I stretched languidly, playing the part of the naive heiress perfectly. "I want our marriage to start with complete trust and transparency." That's wonderful, Halena." Victoria's voice pitched higher with barely contained glee. "Adrian will be so happy. You're making the right choice." The right choice for them? Maybe. In my first life, I'd signed those papers with tears in my eyes, overwhelmed by emotion and love. I'd handed over Morrison Industries, the company my father had built from nothing, to the man who was planning to murder me in 72 hours. But this time would be different. This time I knew exactly what they were planning. I knew about Victoria's gambling debts and her desperate need for money. I knew about Adrian's failing pharmaceutical company and his mounting legal troubles. I knew about their affair, about the way they laughed at me behind my back, about how they'd practiced the grieving widow and best friend routine until it was flawless. Most importantly, I knew about the warehouse where they were planning to take my body after the accidental overdose. I knew about the industrial incinerator they'd already paid to use. I knew about the fake suicide note Victoria had written in my handwriting. I knew everything. Actually, I said, sitting up straighter, there's something else I want to discuss with you. About the future. Victoria tilted her head, her expression innocent as a lamb's. What about it? I've been having the strangest dreams lately. Dreams where people I trust turn out to be different than I thought. I watched her face carefully. Dreams where the people closest to me are planning terrible things. A flicker of something, fear, suspicion, crossed her features before the mask slipped back into place. Dreams are just dreams, honey. You've been under so much stress with the wedding planning and the company merger. You're probably right. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, standing up and moving to my walk-in closet. Still, I think I'll make some changes to my will. Just to be safe. Changes? Victoria's voice was carefully controlled, but I heard the underlying panic. Nothing dramatic, just ensuring that the people who truly care about me are taken care of, while those who might have ulterior motives are discouraged. I pulled out a black cocktail dress. Appropriate for a funeral, I thought grimly. After all, you never know who you can really trust. The silence stretched between us for a long moment. When I turned back around, Victoria was studying me with undisguised suspicion. You seem different today, Halena. Are you sure you're feeling all right? Never better, I said, giving her my brightest smile. In fact, I feel like I've been given a second chance at life, and I intend to make the most of it. The phone rang then, Adrian's contact photo lighting up my screen. The same photo I'd taken of him at the beach last summer, when I'd still believed his declarations of love, when I'd still thought the way he looked at me was adoration instead of calculation. Hello, darling, I answered sweetly. Halena, love, Victoria said she gave you the pill. Are you feeling more relaxed? In my previous life, the poison had made me drowsy and compliant. I'd spent the day in a hazy fog, signing papers without reading them, agreeing to everything he suggested. I'd been the perfect victim. Much better, thank you. Actually, I was wondering if you could come over early today. I have some papers I'd like to review before tonight. A pause. Papers? For the share transfer, I want to make sure everything is perfect. I let excitement creep into my voice. I can't wait to officially make you my partner in everything. Of course, darling. I'll be right over. After I hung up, Victoria was still watching me with that calculating expression. You're really going through with signing over the company shares? Why wouldn't I? Adrian is going to be my husband. What's mine is his. I moved to my vanity, beginning to brush my long blonde hair. Unless you think I shouldn't trust him? No, of course not. Adrian loves you completely. We both do. I know you do. I met her eyes in the mirror. After all, what are best friends for? But I was thinking about the scalpel, about the way she'd held my ankles while Adrian carved me up like a Thanksgiving turkey, about how she'd taken photos of my mutilated body, probably for insurance purposes. Victoria left shortly after, claiming she needed to check on the party preparations. But I knew she was really going to call Adrian to report on my strange behaviour, to make sure their plan was still on track. Let them think I was acting oddly. Let them wonder if something had changed. It wouldn't matter in the end. Because this time, I was the one with the plan. This time, they would be the ones to suffer. And this time, I would be the one watching with a smile. Adrian arrived within the hour, his silver Porsche purring into my private garage like a predator returning to its lair. I watched him from my bedroom window, noting the way he checked his reflection in the car's mirror, adjusting his tie with the practiced vanity of a man who used his looks as weapons. He thought he was coming to collect his prize. My signature are documents that would make him one of the richest men in the city. Instead, he was walking into the carefully laid foundation of his own destruction. "Darling!" His voice echoed through the penthouse as he let himself in with the key I'd given him 6 months ago. Such a trusting gesture, such a fatal mistake in my previous life. I descended the marble staircase slowly, letting the black cocktail dress cling to my curves. Adrian's eyes tracked my movement with the hungry appreciation of a collector examining a rare artifact he was about to acquire. "You look stunning," he murmured, pulling me into his arms. His cologne was expensive, his kiss practiced, his hands possessive as they roamed my body. Though a bit pale. "Are you sure that pill helped?" "Wonderfully." I smiled up at him, my fingers trailing along his jawline. "I feel like I'm seeing everything so much clearer now." He led me to the living room where manila envelopes sat arranged on the glass coffee table, the legal documents that would transfer 51% of Morrison Industries directly into his control. In my first life, I'd signed them eagerly, believing it was a romantic gesture of trust between lovers. Now I could see them for what they really were: execution papers. "I had my lawyers expedite everything," Adrian said, settling beside me on the white leather couch. "Once you sign these, we'll be true partners in every sense of the word." Partners. I picked up the first document, scanning the dense legal text I'd read so carelessly before. "That's an interesting word choice." "What do you mean?" "Partnership implies equality, mutual benefit, shared decision-making." I set the papers down without signing. "But these documents give you complete control over my company. That sounds less like partnership and more like acquisition." Adrian's charming smile faltered for just a moment. "Halena, we discussed this. You said you wanted to focus on charity work after we marry. This arrangement lets you pursue your passions while I handle the business side." I stood, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. 20 stories below, ordinary people lived their ordinary lives, unaware that one of the wealthiest women in the country was planning her fiancé's downfall. "Tell me something, Adrian. What do you know about the Morrison Industries pharmaceutical division?" "Not much." "Why?" "Liar." His company, Blackstone Pharmaceuticals, had been hemorrhaging money for 2 years. Their last 3 drug trials had failed spectacularly, resulting in lawsuits that had drained their resources. Adrian needed my company's research and development infrastructure to survive. "I've been reviewing some interesting reports," I continued conversationally. "It seems Blackstone Pharmaceuticals has been conducting some questionable experiments, off-the-books research involving paralytic compounds." I turned to face him, noting the way his hands had clenched into fists on his knees. "Where did you hear that?" "I hear many things, darling. For instance, I heard that Blackstone's been purchasing large quantities of succinylcholine through shell companies. Strange purchase for a company that's supposedly focusing on cholesterol medication. Succinylcholine, the paralytic he'd used on me. The drug that had left me conscious but helpless while he carved me apart with surgical precision." Adrian stood slowly, his movements predatory. "Those are just rumours, Halena. Industry gossip meant to damage my reputation." "Of course they are." I moved to my bar cart, pouring 2 glasses of wine from the bottle we'd opened last night, the same vintage he'd planned to poison. "I'm sure the FDA investigation will clear everything up." "What FDA investigation?" I smiled, handing him one glass while keeping the other for myself. "The one I requested this morning. I told them I had concerns about my future husband's business practices. They were very interested in the documentation I provided." The colour drained from Adrian's face. "What documentation?" "Oh, nothing too damaging. Just some internal memos Victoria accidentally forwarded to me instead of you. Something about disposal methods, and timeline acceleration. I'm sure it's all perfectly innocent. It wasn't true, of course. Victoria had never sent me any memos. But Adrian didn't know that. And judging by the way his grip tightened on his wine glass, those memos definitely existed. You spoke to Victoria about this? We're best friends, Adrian. We tell each other everything. I took a delicate sip of my wine, savouring both the vintage and the growing panic in his eyes. In fact, she's the one who suggested I might want to reconsider signing these papers. Another lie, but a beautiful one. I could practically see the wheels turning in his head, wondering if Victoria had betrayed their plan, if their carefully constructed alliance was crumbling. That doesn't sound like Victoria, doesn't it? You know, she's been acting strangely lately, making cryptic comments about loyalty and sacrifice. Yesterday, she asked me if I'd ever suspected the people closest to me of having ulterior motives. I paused, letting that sink in, almost like she felt guilty about something. Adrian set down his wineglass without drinking, his movements sharp and controlled. Halena, I think you're misunderstanding. Am I? I moved closer, close enough to see the fine sheen of sweat on his forehead. Because I've been having the most interesting dreams lately. Dreams where my loving fiancé and my devoted best friend are plotting together. Dreams where they're planning to kill me and steal everything I've worked for. Dreams are just dreams. But his voice lacked conviction. Are they? Because in these dreams, you use succinylcholine to paralyze me. Then, you take me to a warehouse in the industrial district, warehouse number 47 specifically, the one owned by Carmichael Waste Management, where you've already paid to use their incinerator. Adrian went very, very still. The only sound was the ticking of my antique clock and the distant hum of city traffic below. You've been having me followed, he said finally. Have I? Or maybe I just know you better than you think. I traced a finger down his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath his expensive shirt. Maybe I know about your gambling debts. Maybe I know about Victoria's affair with her dealer. Maybe I know about the contract you took out on me 3 months ago. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist hard enough to bruise. You're insane. Am I? Then prove it. Drink your wine. We stared at each other for a long moment. His grip was painful, his eyes dark with something that definitely wasn't love. This was the real Adrian, the one who'd worn a mask for 18 months while courting me, pretending to be charmed by my naivety while calculating exactly how much my death would be worth. Let go of me, Adrian. Not until you explain what this is really about. This is about justice. This is about giving you exactly what you planned to give me. I smiled, the expression sharp enough to cut glass. This is about watching you drink poison while I smile and pretend to care. His eyes darted to the wineglass, then back to my face. You wouldn't. Wouldn't I? You were planning to murder me in 3 days. You were going to drug me, paralyze me, and cut me apart while I was still conscious. You were going to burn my body and collect my inheritance while playing the grieving widower. I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. Tell me, darling, what makes you think I'm any less capable of murder than you are? The sound of the front door opening interrupted us. Victoria's voice called out, bright and cheerful. Halena, Adrian, I brought champagne for the engagement party. Adrian's grip loosened slightly, confusion flickering across his features. If Victoria was here, talking normally, maybe I was bluffing about everything. Maybe their plan was still intact. But as Victoria rounded the corner into the living room, her cheerful expression died. She took in the scene, Adrian gripping my wrist, the untouched wine glasses, the unsigned documents on the table. What's going on? She asked carefully. I was just telling Adrian about my dreams, I said pleasantly, the ones where my best friend and my fiancé murder me for my money. Victoria's face went white. Halena, what are you talking about? I'm talking about Warehouse 47. I'm talking about succinylcholine. I'm talking about the incinerator you've already paid to use. I pulled free from Adrian's grip, smoothing down my dress. I'm talking about how you're both going to prison for conspiracy to commit murder. You can't prove anything, Victoria said, but her voice shook. Can't I? I walked to my purse, pulling out my phone. This conversation has been very enlightening. I'm sure the FBI will find it fascinating when I send them the recording. Both of them froze. You're bluffing, Adrian said. Am I? I showed them the phone screen, where a recording app had been running for the past 20 minutes. Voice-activated recording started the moment you admitted to knowing about succinylcholine purchases. The trap was closing, and they were both finally beginning to realize it. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Victoria stood frozen in the doorway, champagne bottle clutched in her white-knuckled grip, while Adrian's face cycled through rage, fear, and desperate calculation. Delete it, he snarled, lunging for my phone. I sidestepped easily, my movements fluid with the grace of someone who knew exactly what was coming. In my previous life, this was when he would have overpowered me, when my trust and shock would have made me helpless. Now, I was ready. Delete what? This? I held up a different phone, an old backup device. Or did you mean this one? Another phone appeared from behind a cushion. Oh, but what about this one? A third device emerged from the bar cart. Adrian stopped mid-lunge, his eyes darting between the phones. What the hell? I've been recording everything for weeks, Adrian. Every conversation, every private moment, every time you and Victoria thought you were alone. I smiled sweetly. Did you really think I was as naive as I pretended? That I wouldn't notice my best friend suddenly having designer clothes she couldn't afford? That I wouldn't see the way you looked at my financial reports like you were memorizing them? Victoria finally found her voice. Halena, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. Adrian's company is bankrupt. You owe $200,000 to some very unpleasant people. Together, you concocted a plan to murder me, inherit my fortune, and solve both your problems. I moved to the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the early evening. The only thing I didn't understand was why you chose such a dramatic method. Poison would have been cleaner. Shh, you crazy bitch, Victoria hissed, her mask finally slipping completely. You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what we're capable of. Don't I? I turned back to them, noting with satisfaction that Adrian was beginning to sweat more heavily. Actually, I know exactly what you're capable of, which is why I took precautions. Adrian wiped his forehead with his sleeve. What kind of precautions? Well, for starters, I changed my will this morning. Everything now goes to charity if I die under suspicious circumstances. You won't see a penny. I watched the colour drain from his face. But more immediately relevant, how are you feeling, darling? A little warm? Slightly dizzy? His hand went to his throat. What did you do? Remember that pill you wanted me to take? The one Victoria brought this morning? I pulled the small white tablet from my pocket, holding it up to the light. Succinylcholine compound mixed with a time-release coating. Very clever design. Your own creation, I believe. Victoria's champagne bottle slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor. You didn't! Oh, but I did. You see, Adrian made one crucial mistake. He kept detailed notes about the poison's effects, timing, and dosage. Very thorough, very scientific. Very stupid to leave them where I could find them. Adrian staggered, catching himself against the back of a chair. This isn't possible. I never took anything. Didn't you? Think carefully. What did you do when you arrived? I tilted my head, watching him with clinical interest. You kissed me. Long, passionate kiss. And I had dissolved half the pill under my tongue beforehand. Amazing how quickly drugs absorb through mucous membranes. His hand flew to his mouth, horror dawning in his eyes. You poisoned me with my own kiss. Poetic, isn't it? Though, technically, you poisoned yourself. I just facilitated the process. I glanced at my watch. You should be feeling the initial symptoms right about now. Dizziness, sweating, muscle weakness in your extremities. As if on cue, Adrian's knees buckled. He caught himself on the coffee table, scattering the unsigned documents across the floor. You're insane! Victoria shrieked, pulling out her phone. I'm calling 911. I wouldn't. My voice carried a cold authority that made her freeze. Because you're not exactly in a position to explain why you're in my penthouse with a man who's been poisoned with a compound that only exists in his laboratory. The police might ask some uncomfortable questions about your involvement. Victoria's phone trembled in her hand. This is murder. Is it? Or is it justice? I moved closer to Adrian, who was now on his knees, gasping for breath. Tell me, Adrian, how long did you plan to keep me conscious while you cut me apart? How many minutes did you think I should suffer for the crime of trusting you? Please, he wheezed. The antidote in my car, briefcase. Ah, yes, the antidote. You came prepared for accidents, didn't you? Very professional. I crouched down to meet his eyes. But here's the thing. I already checked your car. Amazing what you can accomplish with a locksmith and a generous tip. I pulled a small vial from my pocket, holding it just out of his reach. The clear liquid inside seemed to glow in the lamplight. Is this what you're looking for? Adrian reached for it with shaking hands, but I pulled back. Now. First, I think we need to have an honest conversation. No more lies, no more pretending. Just truth. I stood up, looking down at him with the same detached interest he'd shown while planning my murder. Victoria, would you like to tell him? Or shall I? Tell me what? Adrian's voice was barely a whisper now. Victoria backed toward the door, shaking her head frantically. Halena, don't... Tell him about the second will, the one where you inherit everything if both Adrian and I die in the same accident. I smiled at Victoria's horrified expression. Oh, yes, I found that too, hidden in your apartment, along with the suicide note you wrote in my handwriting. Very touching, by the way. All that guilt over betraying my parents' memory. Adrian's eyes widened as understanding dawned. Victoria, you were going to... Kill you too? Eventually, yes. Though she planned to wait a few months, let you enjoy playing the grieving widower before arranging your own tragic demise. I examined my manicured nails with casual interest. Poison, again, probably. She seems to have developed a taste for it. That's not true, Victoria's voice cracked with panic. Adrian, don't listen to her. She's trying to turn us against each other. Am I? Then explain this. I pulled out another phone, playing a recorded conversation. Victoria's voice filled the room, crystal clear. Once Helena's dead and Adrian inherits, we wait 6 months. Then he has an accident, maybe a car crash, maybe another poisoning. Either way, everything comes to me as his beneficiary. Split the money with Dimitri's people, pay off my debts, and disappear to somewhere without extradition treaties. Adrian's face contorted with rage and betrayal. You were planning to kill me too? Adrian, I can explain. Explain? He tried to stand but couldn't manage it. I loved you. I thought we were partners. You loved her money, not her, I corrected gently. Just like she loved yours. Just like you both planned to love mine before feeding me to an incinerator. The paralysis was spreading now. Adrian's arms hung uselessly at his sides, and his breathing was becoming laboured. He had maybe 10 minutes left before the poison stopped his heart completely. The antidote, he gasped. Please. I'll make you a deal, I said, crouching down again. Confess everything. on camera. Tell me about the warehouse, about the incinerator, about how you were going to cut me apart while I was still alive. Give me enough evidence to put Victoria away for life, and I'll consider giving you the antidote. You're bluffing. You won't let me die. Won't I? I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. You made one fatal error in your planning, Adrian. You assumed I was weak because I was trusting. You assumed I was helpless because I was in love. I smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut glass. But I'm my father's daughter. He didn't build a billion-dollar empire by being soft, and neither will I. Adrian stared at me with growing horror as he finally saw what I really was beneath the mask of innocence I'd worn for so long. Choose quickly, I continued, holding up my phone to record. Confess and live or die protecting a woman who was planning to murder you anyway. Victoria made a break for the door, but it was too late. Detective Raymond Cross stepped through the entrance, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. Miss Morrison, we got your call, he said grimly, taking in the scene. Is this the situation you reported? Yes, Detective. Adrian Blackstone is dying from a poison he created to kill me, and Victoria Romano has been his accomplice in planning my murder. I handed him one of the recording devices. Everything you need is on here. As the officers moved to arrest a screaming Victoria, Adrian made his choice. I'll confess, he whispered. Everything. Just, please. I looked down at him for a long moment, remembering the scalpel, remembering the pain, remembering his laughter as he carved me apart. Then I dropped the vial. It shattered against the marble floor, the antidote spreading in a useless puddle. Oops, I said softly, watching the life fade from his eyes. How clumsy of me. 6 months later, I stood in the boardroom of Morrison Industries, watching through floor-to-ceiling windows as Victoria Romano was led from the courthouse in handcuffs. The jury had deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding her guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, attempted fraud, and accessory to Adrian's death. Life without parole. The media had dubbed it the poisoned kiss case. They loved the dramatic irony of it all. The would-be killer destroyed by his own weapon, delivered through an act of supposed love. What they didn't know was that the story was far from over. Miss Morrison? My assistant's voice interrupted my thoughts. Your 3 o'clock appointment is here. I turned from the window, smoothing down my black Armani suit. Send him in. Detective Cross entered, looking older than his 50 years, his grey hair dishevelled and his eyes haunted. He'd been the lead investigator on the case, the one who'd helped me weave together the web of evidence that had trapped Victoria. Now he carried himself like a man who'd seen too much. Detective, please, sit. He remained standing, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. I came to give you this. He placed a thick manila envelope on my desk. The final case file. Everything's been cleared. All investigations closed. You're officially free of any suspicion in Adrian Blackstone's death. Suspicion? I raised an eyebrow, though my heart quickened. I was never a suspect. Weren't you? His eyes fixed on mine with uncomfortable intensity. Self-defense, they ruled. You poisoned him with his own compound to protect yourself from imminent murder. The recordings proved premeditation on his part. Open and shut. Case. I picked up the envelope, but didn't open it. You sound like you disagree with the verdict. Detective Cross was quiet for a long moment, studying my face with the sharp attention of a man who'd spent 30 years reading criminals. You know what bothers me, Miss Morrison? The timing. Timing. You recorded weeks of conversations. You changed your will the morning of the murder. You had multiple backup phones prepared. You knew exactly where Adrian kept his antidote and had already stolen it. He leaned forward, placing both hands on my desk. That's not the behaviour of someone acting in self-defence. That's the behaviour of someone who planned every detail of an execution. My smile never wavered. Are you suggesting I knew about their plan in advance? I am suggesting, he said slowly, that you knew about it because you'd lived through it before. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I set down the envelope very carefully, my movements precise and controlled. That's an interesting theory, Detective. Also, completely insane. Is it? Because I've been investigating you for 6 months now. Not officially, of course. The case is closed. But I'm a curious man, and some things just don't add up. He pulled out a small notebook, flipping through pages covered in cramped handwriting. For instance, you knew exactly where to find evidence of Victoria's gambling debts. You knew the specific warehouse they'd rented. You knew details about their plan that weren't in any of the recordings. My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. Lucky guesses? Or perhaps I'm simply more observant than I appear. Maybe. Or maybe you're something else entirely. He closed the notebook, fixing me with that piercing stare. You know what really convinced me? Your eyes. My eyes? When you watched Adrian die, there was no shock, no horror, no surprise, just satisfaction. The look of someone watching justice being served. He paused. The look of someone who'd seen their own murder and lived to tell about it. The silence stretched between us like a blade. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos. Cars honking, people shouting, life continuing obliviously while we sat in this bubble of dangerous truth. Even if such a thing were possible, I said finally, what would you do about it? Nothing. His answer surprised me. Because regardless of how you knew, Adrian Blackstone was planning to torture and murder an innocent woman. For money. Victoria Romano was willing to kill both of you for greed. They got exactly what they deserved. He stood up, straightening his tie. But I want you to know that I know, and I want you to know that if you ever use whatever gift you have to hurt innocent people, I'll find a way to stop you. I laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Detective Cross, I think you've been watching too many supernatural thriller movies. Perhaps it's time for retirement? Perhaps it is. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Victoria Romano died in prison this morning. My blood turned to ice. What? Heart attack, they're saying. Very sudden. The guards found her collapsed in her cell, screaming about seeing Adrian Blackstone's ghost coming for revenge. He turned back to look at me. Funny thing is, the prison cameras caught something strange. For just a moment, it looked like there were 2 people in that cell. I stared at him, my mind racing. Victoria was dead. But that was impossible. The rebirth only worked for me, didn't it? I thought you should know, Detective Cross continued, in case you start having any unusual dreams. He left without another word, leaving me alone with the devastating implications of his news. I walked back to the window, staring down at the street below without really seeing it. Victoria was dead, which should have been the end of it. Justice served, case closed, revenge complete. So why did I feel like something was terribly wrong? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Miss me yet? V. I dropped the phone, watching it shatter against the marble floor. This wasn't possible. I was the one with the supernatural gift. I was the one who'd been reborn to seek justice. Wasn't I? Another phone buzzed. My backup device. Another message. You didn't think you were the only one, did you? Some of us come back for revenge. Others come back for something else entirely. Can't wait to see you tonight at the charity gala. We have so much to catch up on. Your loving best friend. My hand shook as I read the words. The charity gala, the same event where I'd planned to celebrate my complete victory over my enemies. where I'd intended to announce a new chapter in my life, free from the shadows of betrayal and murder. Instead, it seemed the shadows were coming for me. I looked out at the city again, but now it felt different. Less like a kingdom I'd reclaimed and more like a hunting ground where I was no longer the predator. Because if Victoria could come back from the dead with her memories intact, if she knew what I'd done and how I'd done it, then I wasn't dealing with ordinary revenge anymore. I was dealing with something far more dangerous. I was dealing with a war between the dead. A new message appeared on yet another phone, one I was sure I'd never seen before. The rules have changed, Halena. You opened a door that can't be closed. Now everyone gets a second chance, including the people who deserve to die. Sleep well tonight, if you can. Tomorrow we start playing a new game. Adrian. Somehow, impossibly, Adrian was back too. I sank into my chair, the weight of this new reality crushing down on me. I'd thought my revenge was complete, that justice had been served. Instead, I had apparently triggered something much larger and more terrible than I could have imagined. The dead were returning, and they were angry. But as the initial shock wore off, something else began to build inside me. Not fear, though that was there too. Not despair, though the situation seemed hopeless. No, what I felt was anticipation. Because if Adrian and Victoria thought death had taught them new tricks, they were about to learn that I'd had 6 months to prepare for the impossible. 6 months to research, to plan, to become something more than just a victim with foreknowledge. I'd killed them once. If necessary, I'd kill them again. And this time, I'd make sure they stayed dead. I walked to my office safe, entering the combination with steady fingers. Inside, alongside important documents and emergency cash, was something I'd hoped never to use. A small black journal filled with research on supernatural occurrences, contact information for people who dealt with problems beyond the normal world, and detailed instructions for rituals that could bind restless spirits permanently. Because Halena Morrison hadn't just been reborn for revenge. She'd been reborn to become something far more dangerous than her enemies could possibly imagine. The war between the living and the dead was about to begin, and I intended to win.